How's it going, y'all, and welcome back to the Advanced Climber series. You may have noticed, but this video is being shot in 4K now, so whenever you have this playing in the background as you're cooking breakfast, it can be playing in 4K. We're about 3/4 of the way through this advanced portion of the series, so with a ton of tips more to go, I'll go ahead and get started. Number 70. One of the best ways for an advanced climber to get better is by making fewer mistakes. You're advanced. We're not going to see monumental gains from changing up your training. Yeah, we're going to see some good incremental progress year over year if you're doing it right, but those big wins, those noob gains, they're gone. However, one thing you can do to accelerate your progress, you make fewer mistakes. Look at all the little things that are going wrong and try and take care of those. Yes, we can build a bigger engine, but let's take the parking brake off first. How many times do you have a bad training session because you stayed up a little too late watching Netflix or just scrolling on your phone? How often are your sessions not as good as they could be because you haven't had enough food or you've had too much caffeine? A great way to hunt down these mistakes, these little things, the thorns in your side, is at the end of every session, once you're done, take your shoes off, pack up your bag, sit down for literally just 2 minutes and think, what could have made this session better? Go back through the whole session and think about it. If this is a gym session, did you really need to warm up as long as you did? Yeah, it was fun climbing on the new set, but if you wrote down on paper, hey, I'm going to go spend a ton of time doing all of the new V5s, 6s, and 7s so that I'm so tired I can't try my V10 project, that wouldn't make a lot of sense, would it? Okay, and this isn't a massive mistake. This isn't something that, oh no, this is dooming everything that you're working towards. But it kind of dipped the quality of your session a little bit. Okay, yeah, keep track of it. Maybe you realize, you know what, I've only got 2 hours to session, and I spent probably like half an hour socializing, and that was at the end of my warm-up. I kind of cooled down. I had to warm back up a little bit. That wasn't that great. I could do better. Maybe you forgot to bring a snack, or you left your harness at home, and so even though you were planning on roping up in the gym today to train, you ended up having to go bouldering instead, so you missed out on that endurance workout for the week. These little things, by themselves, not a huge deal, they happen, but if you really track all of these little mistakes over time, they start to add up, and they start to offset all of those little 1% gains you're trying to make with your physical training. And the insidious thing about this is, they're so small that if you don't stop and hold a magnifying glass to them, you may never see them. They just pass by. Maybe it's something like you didn't have a game plan for what you're going to do when you got out to the crag. You got there, were indecisive. By the time you made a plan, people were already on the routes you wanted to try. Everything was a little bit slow, and yeah, it was kind of an okay day, but had you gone in with a bit of a game plan, man, you could have really hit the ground running. You could have gotten a lot of pitches in. You could have tried the things you wanted, worked into that rotation on your project a little bit earlier. There are so many things that you can do to make your sessions better. One of my favorite examples of this was I had a buddy who had a sport climbing project that he was really excited for in the fall. It has a very narrow weather window, so there aren't a lot of weeks that you can try it in the spring and the fall. The fall was approaching. He had been training all summer for this. He was really excited. 2 of the times that he went out there, he forgot a harness. And what that meant was he went out and didn't get to climb. The first time it happens, it's like, this is embarrassing. Like, this sucks. Also, it sucks for the partner that he was climbing with because they didn't get to climb that day either. But when it happens for a second time, suddenly you have to kind of do the math of, well, this is a really short weather window and this cliff is kind of a drive to get to. He was also working a lot. He could only get there 1 day a week. And realistically, this was about an 8-week weather window. That means that 25% of his sessions that he was able to have that fall, he didn't get to climb because he forgot a harness. That's a lot. 25%? For a lot of people, that might be the difference between succeeding and not. And for such a silly little reason too. Obviously, this is kind of an extreme example. It's a big thing. It fully stopped him from climbing. There are so many little things that are hobbling you along the way, and if you don't stop, take a step back and really look for them, you're just going to keep limping along, thinking your progress isn't that great because you're not giving good enough inputs, you're not training hard enough, and you're not doing the right things with your preparation. Where realistically, we've just got the parking brake on. You might be doing everything right with your training and your practice right now, and the only real difference you need to make is getting rid of a couple of these little mistakes. Number 71, understanding constrictions, jams, and cams. I try and tell my bouldering and sport climbing clients all the time that the more you understand trad climbing techniques, jams, constrictions, things like that, the better off you will be. It is such an easy win with sport climbing and bouldering. And the funny thing is, if you're someone who doesn't use these ever, you might even be thinking to yourself, well, I also never see them. And the thing is, they're probably right in front of you because they are everywhere. But if you don't know what you're looking for and you don't know how to use it, you're probably not going to see it. Now, I'll be completely honest here. I am not the greatest at crack climbing technique. I often joke that as a boulderer, I'm pretty great at it. As a sport climber, I'm okay. As a trad climber, yikes, not the best. Even then, I can't count the number of times that I use these types of techniques with high-level bouldering, high-level sport climbing for rests, for being able to figure out different foot positions that maybe wouldn't be viable for me otherwise. There are so many things that you can do to leverage these types of trad climbing techniques into high-level hard bouldering and sport climbing. And the cool thing is, the worse you are at it now, the more there is to gain. If you are pitifully bad at anything, you're going to get pretty decent very quickly with a very little amount of work. The opportunity cost at this point as an advanced climber who's already built up a lot of their stats pretty high is so low. Like, it's so cheap in terms of time and effort for you to improve at something you're horrifically bad at. Yeah, you put in 2 hours of work to just understand foot cams, hand jams, finger locks. You do that once, honestly, you're going to be dramatically better than you were. And to put my money where my mouth is, I said earlier, these are skills that I'm okay with. I'm not the best. Not even halfway to the best, frankly. So something I've been considering is getting Pete Whitaker's book on crack climbing techniques and going through it. If this is something that y'all would like to see, me going through these techniques, learning them, figuring out how to apply them best to sport and bouldering, let me know. I can make videos on that. It would keep me honest in this journey. Number 73. Are you comfortable looking dumb and not being the strongest climber around? This isn't something that everyone's going to run into, but many people will. Getting good at something is fun. It feels good to feel competent, and you fought a long way to get to this point. Because of that, a lot of us will start to become a little bit defensive around what we want to climb on. And we start to only want to climb on things that we will succeed on because we like the way that feels and we like the way it looks when we succeed. One of the best pieces of advice that you can get as an advanced climber is to climb with people who are better than you. If you've gotten very used to being the big fish in a small pond, climbing with people who are better than you can be very intimidating, and you might have to learn how to check your ego to some degree. There are some places where you go where, climbing 514 kind of means something, but there are a lot of places you go where all that climbing 514 means is that you're in a 6-person deep line for your project, and you're probably not going to be the best person on it. Someone else is there to try and flash it. I have seen incredibly talented climbers crumble whenever they made it to the big stage and they were no longer the big fish in the small pond. They were just another climber out there. The earlier you can learn this lesson, the better. This is something that's seen very often with prodigies. You'll see these young athletes who absolutely dominate their field, whether that's just regionally or maybe even at a national level, and no one else at their age can compete with them. So they win all of the time, and they're not used to truly being challenged. So they don't learn how to deal with failure just yet, and especially failure tied to losing to someone else. It's not uncommon that when these prodigies start competing against adults, or they start competing at an international level, they've never built that framework that allows them to deal with failure. And because of that, it turns out this person who's won all of these awards, all of these competitions, is really fragile. They have a very brittle foundation, and maybe they don't like the sport as much anymore. I've heard many great youth coaches talk about trying to build in failure early on for children. Just making kids fail so that it's not going to be a rude awakening when they do end up climbing at a high level and competing with some of the best in the country or the world, they're not going to suddenly be losing for the first time ever as an 18-year-old. They learned how to deal with that maybe when they were 12, 13, 14, 15. They got to really get over that feeling of, I have to be the best and my self-worth is tied up in that. Even if you're not a prodigy and you're not a youth competitor and you're just an adult who likes doing this for fun, I do think it's still important to be able to learn how to deal with this, how to be comfortable failing in front of other people. I mean, and honestly, when you get over it, you learn that you can collaborate with people. Finding people who are better than you is such a boon to your climbing ability. That is such a great way to get better faster. So the faster you can get over feeling like you look dumb and starting to embrace finding those situations where you're like, oh man, I'm not the best in the room anymore. Amazing. You're in the right room now. Number 74, understanding the benefits and limitations of conditions for different types of climbing. Conditions, temps, condies, the holy grail, the thing that we chase more than anything. It's the reason why we wait for specific seasons to try and climb on different climbs. Every single climb has its own unique set of ideal conditions, and every person does too. This might range from personal preference to what your circulation is like. Do you get a lot of blood flow to your hands and feet? Do you not? That's important. What is your skin like? Do you have really wet skin or really dry skin? Or somewhere in between? For some people, their yearly schedule, how their work lines up, might mean that they have to climb in the heat or the extreme cold or during certain specific periods of the year. Beyond the personal temps, things that are good for you specifically, different rock types and different climbing styles are affected by conditions differently. This is important for two main reasons. One, it's good to know what ideal is. If I'd like to get to a boulder or a route when it's in perfect conditions. And if that's going to happen, I need to know what are all the factors that make it perfect. Why does this route feel great when it's 35 degrees and in direct sunlight? But this one, I would much rather it be 55 degrees and in the shade, maybe a little windy. We need to know these things. It helps us build a strategy for our performance season. First reason is we want to know what optimal is so that we can plan around it. The number two reason, and this one is really important, is we're not always going to climb on things when they're perfect. I mean, you can, but you're only going to climb 10 days a year. I would rather climb more than that. So it's very important to know what optimal will feel like because let's say you go out and you try a boulder. It's 75 degrees outside, no wind, full sun, and you think, wow, this feels terrible. It feels so incredibly hard. The reason we want to know what optimal will be is because we can then say, well, if I'm here, if I'm at 75, stagnant, sunny, how much of a difference will this feel when it is 45 degrees, overcast, windy, low humidity, all of these things? Because if we can do that mental math, then we can really decide, well, yeah, maybe this project does feel hard today, but with some good temps, I totally have a shot. That's very important to know. There are so many times where you might encounter a move and you say, this feels impossible. Actually, I'm trying a route right now, and I said this just last week, where I hit a sloper, it's in full sun, it is out of season, but the rest of the route felt good. It's a really steep climb, you climb out of this cave, and there's a moderately difficult sloper move at the lip of the cave. And I went through, was trying all the moves down low. I get to the sloper move. It is hot, not windy, in direct sun. I can't do the move. But I know from experience, when it's cold, this is going to be fine. It's not even going to feel like a move. I don't need to stress about it that hard right now. Now it's useful to be able to practice it in the heat, and that's nice because I'm going to have to try a little bit harder. I'll probably have to refine beta a little better to do it in bad conditions, but I'm not stressed. I know the second it gets cold, I'll stick to that sloper just fine. Now the thing you don't want to do is associate colder as better all of the time, because that's not necessarily the case. For climbing on holds like slopers, colder conditions tend to be better, almost as cold as you can go before your muscles start to function worse. There is that trade-off. When it's really warm, your muscles will feel great. Like you're going to feel awesome. If you're very cold, you might feel a little bit more stiff. You're not going to feel as athletic, but it's a trade-off because the rock will feel stickier as it gets colder and your skin's not going to sweat as much. It's going to feel a lot harder. Maybe for really sharp crimps, it might be useful to have some colder temps because your skin's not going to be as likely to split. However, when it comes to crimping, we tend to make a really tight fist. We squeeze our forearm down really tight and it occludes blood flow to our hands. So it just cuts off the blood flow. And that means that you can numb out really easy on very crimpy climbs. For this reason, when it comes to sport climbing on really hard small crimps, I don't actually love freezing temperatures because my hands will go numb almost immediately. I actually need it to be a little bit warmer so that my hands won't numb out and I won't crimp all of the blood out of my hands. As a basic rule of thumb, slopier holds do better with the cold. The more in-cut holds get, you get a little bit more leeway. With that in mind, steeper climbs also tend to have bigger holds, slightly more in-cut. You're not going to have to worry about temperatures quite as much. But if you're doing something that's hard, that's slab, vertical, flatter, slopey holds, colder tends to be a little bit better. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. I appreciate all the feedback that y'all have been giving me. That's helped me make this a better channel, and it helps me figure out what it is that y'all want to see out of this and what you want to learn from me. Keep leaving those comments down below. I find that incredibly helpful. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.